Okay, example 1. If f of x equals x cosine of x, find f double prime. And notice here the prime prime, that's the second derivative. The second derivative is simply the derivative of the first derivative. And makes sense, right? The third derivative is the derivative of the second derivative. The fourth derivative is the derivative of the third derivative, and so on. So just keep on finding derivatives. Sometimes they get easier, and sometimes they get uglier. But in this case, it's going to be not too bad, I don't think. So what we look at every time we differentiate, our task is differentiate function. What is the structure of the function? That's what we have to ask ourselves. What type of function is this? How am I going to differentiate this? What type of rules do I have to use? That's what you have to focus on. So I've got x being multiplied by cosine of x. That is a product of two functions. That's going to be the product rule of differential. That's the basic type of function it is. Product function. Product rule is necessary. Within the differentiation, function 1 is a polynomial, power rule. Function 2 is a cosine function. That's the cosine rule. So as far as differentiation of each piece, that's how we do it. And again, the product rule is 1 d2 plus 2 d1. This is a derivative. This is a derivative. This is write down function 1. This is write down function 2. So f prime of x equals function 1 x times d2. The derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x. Plus is just part of the product rule. Product rule creates two terms. When I do 2d1, function 2 is cosine of x exactly as it is. Times d1, the derivative of x is just 1. My recommendation when you're doing a second derivative is make the first derivative as simple as possible before you go on to a second derivative. Do a little algebra, make it prettier before you go on to try and find the second derivative. So at this point I'm doing some algebra, so I'm going to continue to call this f prime of x. Okay? So from here to here I did calculus, f of x changed to f prime of x. From here to here I'm doing algebra, just beautifying up the answer a little bit. So I'm continuing to call it f prime of x. I got x times negative sine of x makes negative x sine of x. Plus cosine of x times 1 is just cosine of x. So again, now I've got myself a function. I'm looking at a structure of things in order to establish how to find a derivative, because again, my job is to find the second derivative. Here's my derivative. I want to differentiate this. This is my first term. This is my second term. Every plus and minus represents a new piece that's going to have some sort of differentiation structure or technique in order to differentiate it. So the red boxed thing, I have to establish what kind of function it is to establish what rules. And as Chris said, it's a product. Negative x function 1 is being multiplied by sine of x function 2. Product rule 1d2 plus 2d1 is going on there. Function 1 is a polynomial function. Function 2 is a sine function. So I have to use the power rule. I have to use the sine of x rule. The cosine of x is just a cosine function. That's basic, right? Its derivative is negative sine of x. That one's easy. So if I go on to do f double prime of x now, I'm going to do the derivative of this one in red, this one in green, just to see where things are coming from. For function 1, negative x sine of x, again using the product rule, 1, which would be negative x d2, derivative of sine of x is cosine of x, plus 2, that's sine of x, d1 is negative 1. Okay? Again, this is a derivative of sine of x. This is a derivative of negative x. Other than that, I'm writing down function 1 and function 2 because that's what the product rule tells me to do. That's the entire derivative of negative x sine of x. Not simplified yet, but we don't care about that. And then I got plus cosine of x. Derivative of cosine of x is negative sine of x. Plus negative sine of x, same as minus sine of x. So again, the red represents the derivative of negative x sine of x. The green represents the derivative of cosine of x. I've completely differentiated everything, so again I'm done with the calculus. I did calculus from here to here, so I changed f prime to f double prime. Every time you do calculus, you're changing that prime. Okay, and now that I'm done with the calculus, now I'm doing algebra again. So if I'm doing algebra, f double prime stays what it's called. If I beautify things up, negative x cosine of x, just negative x cosine of x. Don't need the brackets. Plus sine of x times negative 1 makes minus sine of x. And minus sine of x just makes minus sine of x. Okay. sometimes we're done there. In this case, you'll notice sine of x and sine of x are like terms. They're both negative, so I add them together. So my best final answer on this one, f double prime of x, is negative x cosine of x minus 2 sine of x. If they ask me to do a third derivative, negative x cosine of x is a product, minus 2 sine of x just a sine function with a constant being multiplied by it. That one's ready to go. It would be basically the same difficulty level as this one is.